Camila Mendes' story is not just about fame, red carpets, and flashing cameras. It is about resilience, reinvention, and the quiet courage it takes to believe in yourself when the world is still trying to decide who you are, because long before, she became a household name through her breakout role as Veronica Lodge in Riverdale. She was a young girl navigating constant change, cultural shifts, and personal insecurities that could have easily convinced her to play small instead of dreaming big. Born in Charlottesville, Virginia, and raised between the United States and Brazil, Camila carried with her a multicultural identity that shaped her worldview in ways both empowering and challenging. Moving frequently throughout her childhood, adjusting to new schools, new friendships, and new environments, she learned adaptability early, but with adaptability often comes a silent loneliness. The kind that forces you to grow up faster, the kind that teaches you how to observe before speaking, how to measure rooms before claiming space. And in many ways, those early experiences became the invisible training ground for the confident, sharp, magnetic characters she would later portray on screen. Yet confidence is rarely born fully formed, it is carved through doubt, and Camila has openly spoken about the insecurities she faced growing up, about struggling with body image, about comparing herself to unrealistic standards, about questioning whether she truly belonged in an industry that often tries to box women into narrow definitions of beauty and success. And this honesty is what makes her journey so powerful, because instead of pretending she arrived fearless, she shows that fear walked beside her every step of the way. When she pursued acting seriously and eventually studied at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, she was not entering Hollywood with connections or guarantees. She was entering with ambition, discipline, and a quiet fire that refused to be extinguished. She auditioned, she waited, she faced rejection, and like so many aspiring actors, she lived in that uncertain space between hope and disappointment. But then came the audition that would shift everything, the role of Veronica Lodge, a character layered with intelligence, glamour, vulnerability, and strength, and when she landed that role in Riverdale, it wasn't just a career breakthrough, it was a cultural moment. Suddenly, she was part of a global phenomenon, her face recognized worldwide, her social media exploding, her life transforming almost overnight, and while the outside world saw overnight success, what they didn't see were the years of preparation, the hours of self-doubt battled in silence, the resilience built through constant relocation, the discipline sharpened in acting school. Success rarely arrives without hidden chapters of struggle. And Camila's rise is proof of that. As Veronica, she brought depth to a character who could have easily been reduced to a stereotype. Instead, she infused her with ambition, emotional complexity, and moments of raw vulnerability that resonated with millions of young viewers who saw themselves reflected in her strength and her flaws. And beyond the show's success, what truly defined Camila's trajectory was her decision to use her platform for authenticity rather than perfection. In an era dominated by curated feeds and filtered realities, she chose transparency, openly discussing mental health, self-esteem, and the pressures placed on women in entertainment, reminding her audience that confidence is not the absence of insecurity, but the decision to move forward despite it. And this vulnerability did not weaken her brand, it strengthened it, because people are drawn to truth, drawn to stories that mirror their own internal battles, drawn to public figures who admit they are still evolving, still learning, still human. And as her career expanded beyond television into film projects, brand partnerships, and high-profile appearances, she demonstrated that growth is not about abandoning your roots, but about expanding your range, taking risks, challenging yourself creatively, stepping into roles that push you beyond comfort. And each red carpet appearance, each magazine cover, each new film credit became not just a symbol of fame, but a milestone of persistence. The girl who once questioned whether she fit in was now redefining what it means to belong in Hollywood, bringing Latina representation into mainstream spotlight with grace and power, proving that cultural identity is not something to minimize, but something to celebrate boldly. And in interviews, she often speaks about discipline, about showing up prepared, about respecting the craft, about understanding that longevity in this industry requires more than beauty. It requires substance, adaptability, and relentless work ethic because trends fade, hype fades, but dedication endures. And what makes her story inspiring is not just that she became famous, but that she remained intentional, choosing projects that align with her growth, speaking up about industry standards that need to evolve, advocating for body positivity, and reminding young women that self-worth cannot be outsourced to public opinion. It must be cultivated internally, and perhaps the most powerful lesson in her journey is this: you do not need to have it all figured out to begin. You only need the courage to start, to audition, to apply, to step forward even when your voice shakes. Because the world often celebrates the highlight reel while ignoring the backstage battles. Yet it is in those private moments of perseverance that real transformation happens. Camila Mendes stands today not just as an actress but as an example of resilience in a hyper-visible world. A reminder that success is not about becoming flawless, but about embracing your imperfections and using them as fuel. About turning self-doubt into self-discovery. About understanding that the path to confidence is rarely straight but always worth walking. And as millions continue to follow her journey, what resonates most is not just her talent, but her transparency. Not just her beauty, but her bravery. Not just her fame, but her growth. Because in the end, her story whispers a powerful truth to anyone chasing a dream. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to struggle. You are allowed to rise slowly. And when your moment finally arrives, it will not be an accident. It will be the result of every silent battle you refused to surrender to, every rejection you endured, every insecurity you confronted, every time you chose courage over comfort. And that is what makes Camila Mendes not just a star on screen, but a symbol of modern resilience in a world that desperately needs real, unfiltered inspiration. As her career accelerated after the explosive success of Riverdale, Camila Mendes faced a new kind of pressure that many dream about, but few are prepared for: the pressure of being watched constantly, analyzed constantly, judged constantly. And it is one thing to chase success in private, but an entirely different challenge to grow under a global spotlight where every expression can be misinterpreted and every mistake amplified. Yet what makes her evolution remarkable is that she refused to let visibility dictate her identity. Instead of becoming a carefully manufactured celebrity, she leaned deeper into authenticity, choosing honesty over illusion, speaking openly about the unrealistic beauty standards that once shaped her self-image and the quiet battles she fought with comparison. And in doing so, she transformed vulnerability into strength, showing that power does not always roar. Sometimes it simply stands firm and says, "This is who I am, take it or leave it." And that message resonated especially with young women navigating the same digital age pressures, where social media filters blur reality and confidence is often mistaken for perfection. Camila became a reminder that growth is messy, non-linear, and deeply personal, stepping beyond television. She expanded into film projects that allowed her to explore different emotional ranges, proving she was never meant to be defined by one role alone. Because true artists evolve, they stretch, they experiment, they risk failure in pursuit of depth, and with each new character she embraced complexity, rejecting the idea that women on screen must fit into predictable molds. She chose scripts that reflected ambition, flaws, humor, heartbreak, resilience. And in doing so, she quietly carved a space for multidimensional female representation in mainstream entertainment. Her red carpet appearances grew more confident, her interviews more reflective, her voice more assured, and yet behind the glamour, there remained a disciplined professional who understood that longevity in Hollywood demands continuous reinvention. Trends shift, audiences change, industries evolve, and only those willing to adapt while staying grounded survive. And grounded she remained, often crediting her family and multicultural upbringing for keeping her perspective intact. Remembering what it felt like to be the new girl in school, remembering the uncertainty of auditions, remembering the quiet dreams she once held privately. And that memory of struggle became her anchor, because success without gratitude can hollow a person. But success paired with humility builds character, and character sustains legacy. She also became more intentional with her platform, advocating for healthier conversations around body image and mental well-being, not as a distant public figure, preaching from above, but as someone who had lived through the same internal conflicts, someone who had once questioned her worth in rooms where she felt scrutinized, someone who understood that self-acceptance is a practice, not a destination. And this openness deepened her connection with fans,